More than welcome to my collection of Star versus the Evil. I just admitted that on air.
Then check out some weird shit, dude.
You got some weird shit. I got some strange anime in my collection, as well as some Disney cartoons that I'm not very proud of admitting. Oh wait, we're live. Shoot.
Yeah, we're live.
All right. So Devin joining me today. He's been gone for a little bit, and we are about ready to start the show. Devin, are you ready for this?
Yes, I am ready for this.
All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2... Hello and welcome back to another episode of DSLR Film NOOB Podcast. I've got Devin with me today, and we are here to discuss some new drones, some Micro Four Thirds news, some Sony cameras, because I want Devin's input on that. But first, Devin, it's been almost 3 weeks since you've been on a show. What have you been up to, man?
Oh man, too much. Last weekend I was on a set. That was fun, little indie set, little indie project for someone here in the LA area. And the first was a 12-hour day, which is pretty good on a sound stage. I didn't realize that they have these. They've got entire sound stages that have pre-built operating rooms, the police headquarters, bedrooms, offices, all that kind of stuff. All the C-stands, all the usual stuff that you need, as well as, a couple of lights and like everything you need in the production for one cost you can get a day. I think this maybe $750 for a day. So you get everything you need. So working on that set, it was fun. Tons of PAs, tons of new faces, tons of people to meet. And then the next day was an on-location thing that, of course, it wasn't 12 hours. It went to 15 hours for that day. So still, a little tired from Sunday, but it was a lot of fun, and I've been really enjoying it.
Was it really only $750 a day for the rental?
Yeah, normally they say on their website it's $1,000. They currently have an offer that's $750, and if you have a crew less than 12, they'll bring it down to $500.
Wow, that's really freaking affordable. I'm surprised by that. Last time I had to rent a soundstage, I want to say it was like $2,000 or $3,000 a day or better. And that's not including like lights and stuff.
Well, and this one, they kind of like threw it off as like, hey, we have a couple of lights if you want. They probably had about 4 1x1 LED panels, no battery options. They did include like 16 radios, which was a pretty good deal. But stands, like I started pulling out flags and scrims and everything else. All of it was torn. Like I had to put 2 giant 2x2s together to try to cover up all the holes that they had in them to get a consistent scrim for one of the lights. So it's not exactly like everything was great quality. Sometimes you get what you pay for, but at least the location was super cheap and big, and there was soundproofing on the roof, so it wasn't terrible.
What were you guys shooting on?
We were shooting on the Blackmagic 2.5K, that old cinema camera, which, the image looks great, bit of a workhorse. Of course, we did the audio separately on a 4-track Tascam unit, but I had a lot of fun working with that camera. No problems, no overheating issues. It's a little bit bigger, and I probably would have preferred a Micro Four Thirds mount on it instead of an EF mount, but because then I could use a speed booster and other goodies with that camera. But still, with its 2x crop or whatever, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like using the pocket camera, which they use my pocket camera as a B camera and an insert camera. And that guy's really hard to get wide on when you're trying to get that cinematic image. So it really only works for like close-up and detail shots.
You got to get that 8mm f1.8 on my end, guys. Nothing exciting. You just saw me a couple days ago with Mitch. So between there and now, editing, and I was just telling Devin, doing some house hunting here coming up, trying to find a bigger location. Yet again, I love moving places. It's just amazing to do that all the time. But on that note, I think it's probably time for the news. Oh, wrong button. Time for the news. I can't even hit the buttons right today. First up on the list here is actually interesting to me and sort of interesting in general. This is a Micro Four Thirds system, drone fold-up system from PowerVision, very similar to what we see from DJI. This guy has a 29.5 minute fly time, is pretty similar, has all the sensors for tracking distance, collision avoidance, and so on. No word yet on pricing, but it does have a Micro Four Thirds gimbal setup on that, and I think they might actually be planning on selling it separately as well, similar to the Osmo. What do you think about this, Devin? Especially now that we're starting to see Micro Four Thirds as sort of throw in as an extra for these drones.
You know, I think I'm happy to see it because it means the Micro Four Thirds system is alive and well, because I've got several lenses invested in it. So, of course, I'm happy to see more people using it. While it does seem to be a bit more compact, I mean, this almost seems just not compact when you compare to GoPro's latest offering that you guys covered last week, as well as what the DJI Mavic that came out. So, but having interchangeable lenses is something that doesn't have. So this isn't the first time we've seen it. The thing is, there's no word on the pricing. It could come in at a very good price. It seems to have obstacle avoidance. And for the most part, it seems pretty compact. But once again, I feel like any company can come out with something that looks like a customized drone. But then you got to ask yourself the support system behind it. How good is the software? Because throwing some gimbals together and some motors together and some drivers for it and a control board, they're all kind of the same. And even when you add obstacle avoidance and everything else, a lot of these are off-the-shelf components soldered together. The question is like, what's the firmware like and what's the software like to actually run this thing? So I'm excited to see more in the space because the space has been innovating really hard, and I'd love to see it go even further. And I'm really impressed with that flight time that they're claiming. But once again, until you get it in your hands and people start seeing, like, is this like a DJI, really easy to fly? You can kind of do it one-handed. Or is this something where it randomly flies away on you? That's still a concern. You throw all these control systems in there and something doesn't work right, and suddenly it thinks that something is running towards it, and it may like react by backing away from it, and then it just flies away because it doesn't know what it's doing. So that's when it comes to kind of a unheard company like that. That's what I want to see, is how it's actually controlled and what the software is like, because I feel like that's the make or break. These are pretty complicated devices, especially as cameras, and being able to use them efficiently and quick is an important part of set. Actually, we had a drone on the shoot, and unfortunately the person flying it, it was their second time flying it, and 2 seconds into the shot they ran it into a tree, and we didn't have any extra propellers, so that ended that shot.
Well, one of the things that differentiates this... Oh, go ahead, Devin. Sorry, you're cutting out pretty bad today.
I was just saying... So, the software becomes things in action.
Okay, I didn't catch the last bit there, but I will tell you that the 3-axis section of the DJI, which is this guy right here, will set you back about 3,900, and that's with the raw extension that allows you to record to SSDs. This unit does not. It records internally a 60 meg codec, so that might be part of the price savings, hopefully, on this guy. And maybe if it's under $3,000 or $4,000, it might be competitive with the $6,000 almost price of the X5R from DJI. Moving on down the line here, and that is funny that he crashed it into a tree first thing.
Here's the thing. No one knew that it was the pilot's second time flying a drone. And so people were kind of impressed because the first thing it did was like kind of go up high and then fly straight through a couple of power lines without touching them. Like, what? Whoa, what is going on? Someone's trying to show off here, but it was just luck. And then when the shot got set up, it followed the car and went straight into the tree, unfortunately. So, I mean, the DJI drone still survived. It just had a chip propeller, and we had no extra propellers on standby. So that ended at that.
One of the things to think about if you're looking at the latest offering, the Maverick and whatever GoPro's label is, both of those are priced at about $1,000, right? Well, you can go buy a Phantom Mark IV used for about $800 to $1,000.
And that's got a great camera on it.
Yeah, it's got a great camera on it. It's pretty much everything you would want out of a drone, and it's very competitive, especially compared to these offerings. A better image quality from the early reviews of the Maverick to the Phantom. So, why wouldn't you go get a used Phantom? I don't really know.
I think most people should definitely get the if size isn't a concern for a lot of people, portability is like the most important thing. But from what I've seen, the Mavic is really soft. It's different if, hey, I'm just like out with my friends shooting. This is a toy. This is just fun for me. I go hiking a lot and I want to get that aerial footage. Then great, it's perfect for that. But if your like top concern is image quality, then something like these ones with Micro Four Third lens mounts, or something like the Phantom 4 still has brilliant 4K footage. And I imagine because the GoPro camera is using a GoPro 5, that should have some brilliant footage as well.
Oh, yeah. And it's a karma. Thank you, chat room, for
that's right.
refreshing.
That's right. It's a karma.
I wasn't expecting to talk about that, so I didn't add it to the notes. And there's so many coming out now that it's kind of hard to keep track of all the names. The next thing on the list here, and this is actually sort of interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with this as an app, but Prisma. I think it's Prisma. I'm just gonna go with Prisma. They're a company that uses AI to analyze famous artists and art pieces, and then they use that AI to image analyze an actual photo and then recreate the photo using one of the styles of art that the AI has worked on. This has previously only been available for photos, but they recently released an update that will allow for video as well. Basically, you'll load your video up, the AI will analyze it, and then kick out some images and video to go along with that. This is currently only available for the iPhone, but it should be coming soon for Android devices. I'm checking the link here, and I actually screwed this up, Devin.
Yeah, it's going to your Dig account. Come on, dude.
What am I doing wrong here? What do you think about, first of all, this is a photo proposition. Have you used this at all?
No. It's like a filter system, right?
No, it's not, actually. That's the difference. So what they do with Prisma is they actually grab your images, and here's the announcement I meant to link to it but did not. They grab your images and they recreate them instead of filtering them. So normally with a filter, it'll just apply something over the top of your image. With this, the AI analyzes the image and then recreates it from scratch. Using whatever art style that you choose. So it's not just an applied filter, it's actually a recreation of the image itself. There are some limitations, 1:1 ratios for photos right now, and the video, I don't know yet what is available as far as video capabilities are concerned, but it is kind of cool. You could do a scanner darkly type of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
With this pretty easily, and imagine, going pencil line, do the old 80s music video style thing with this, and have traces of Sting dancing about or something like that.
Man, scanner darkly. It's been forever since I've heard about that. For me though, I still think about it as a filter. I understand what you're saying. It works differently. It's looking at like lines and composition and everything else. But for me, the way that it's applied and used, it's just a very, very smart filter. It's the kind of thing that I'd like to see. Well, this is good because this is a very stylized, specialized case. But that's where this kind of technology would start, because that's where people are going to recognize and be useful. But I see these kind of very advanced algorithms being perfect for things like color correcting, because there's so many things where people like grab LUTs, and there's some people who throw a LUT on an entire timeline and call it a day, and sometimes that's good enough. And there's other people where you start with your a LUT that gets you close, and then you start to tweak each shot to make it work best for that LUT. But I feel like the technology's there. There just isn't enough push in that market space for computers to actually start figuring out color in a way that makes sense. So when you apply a LUT, it takes into account Is this a dark scene? Or is most of it dark? What's the subject? And making sure that the subject is properly exposed and all these other things. There's things like that could be done in software that right now I feel like there aren't a whole lot of public interest in that area yet. And I feel like that's where kind of color correcting is going to go. Of course, coloring is an art. I don't think it would ever go away, but I could definitely see in the future software starting to color for potential filmmakers and things like that.
So take a look at this really quick. This is a picture of my wife that has been run through Prisma, and you can see that it's done a very good pencil line drawing of this. What I was able to do with this, which is very handy, was take this image and then take it into Illustrator and do line trace on it. And from there, I was able to create a vector out of this and laser this as a vector onto an object, which, I mean, that's a very specific case, but it is really interesting and kind of cool that I saved many steps. I didn't have to go in and trace this with a pen or anything like that in order to create this image. And I dinked around with it just a little bit and tried a few other ones. It does get a little bit wacky here if you start looking closely at this, but it does a good job, and it's surprisingly decent.
Well, and you can tell that it's not just a filter, because all those pencil filters try to cover up the fact that they don't know where a line starts and a line ends by just kind of putting a sketch kind of feel over the entire image, just because it would look bad if it doesn't know where an edge starts. But you're right. That totally detected this is a surface. And this is where to maybe add a little bit of shading, but this is an edge. This is a line I'm going to draw on. So it is really impressive in how it's figuring out how to do that. Maybe art is dead. Who knows?
Let's not go that far, but I'm interested to see how the video turns out. There are some examples on their website. I'll fix that link in the show notes. It's prism-ai.com if you want to check that out, guys. Next thing on the list here is actually, Devin put this in. I completely missed this. This is the camera that I was dreaming of about 2 years ago when I purchased the E1Z cam that I'm currently shooting this show on. This is a prototype from Panasonic that showed up at Photokina, and this little guy is basically a GH4 sensor scaled down to fit into a minuscule box that is basically Wi-Fi controlled or USB controlled. This is from newshooter.com, and they were able to take a look at the prototype. They had a few examples of gimbals there, and be sure to check the link out to see the video of that thing in progress. But Devin, first of all, what do you think of a tiny camera like this? As DJI and this other company that we just talked about, they're producing stuff like this already with similar sensors. Is this too little too late from Panasonic?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think that the E1 necessarily delivered a huge splash in the marketplace of tiny cameras.
A lot of complaints.
There might have been a lot of complaints. But knowing Panasonic and all the rock solid work that they've been doing with the G2 and a GH3 and all that, because, I mean, we've never had overheating issues or firmware issues or you always turn the thing on and it works. It's a workhorse. And so applying that in a drone environment definitely makes sense, as well as the compatibility with all their lenses. It's just going to work, and probably all the Olympus. Let's just assume that your big guys like Panasonic and Olympus lenses would work out of the box without a problem on this guy. What I'd be interested to see is if they have kind of that amazing autofocus system they have on the GH4 on something like this. I mean, you could potentially start using a drone shot for some really crazy medium shots or maybe even close-up shots if that autofocus system is in there without needing a focus puller and focusing gears and all that other stuff. I think it could really open up what you can do, because that's part of what we don't have on drones right now in terms of ease of use. I mean, you get a big fat drone with 16 propellers and everything. Yeah, you can afford to put on a focus puller motor and a zoom motor and all this other stuff and set up a second controller and have a second guy run the camera. But in terms of creating a small package where one guy could be doing zooming if it's a powered lens as well as focusing, that's something that we don't have in a low-end consumer drone. So without with the big drones, of course, and if you're flying reds and stuff, you don't care about this. But I think this could be really interesting depending on how well that control software works. And things like lag and everything else being taken into account, because we're talking about it's supposed to work with an iPad wirelessly. Of course, I'd hope to want to see it on Android too, but I'm sure knowing Panasonic, they seem to support Android okay. So I'm very excited for it. I think it could really be the answer for, wanting a drone where you could stick this guy on there. I don't see anything about a partnership, though, with any of the guys. DJI's got their own camera systems going, and, of course, GoPro's got their own camera systems going. So I'm not sure what you would throw it on, because I don't even think DJI, besides, the Phantom 2 or Phantom 3, even has an open system for putting your own stuff on. Because it's not like the Maverick is going to have an open system.
Well, the X5 and X3, both of those use their proprietary head with a micro Four Thirds mount. And you're still limited, even with something like this, you'd be limited on lens selection simply because the weight and balancing. And this is just a prototype from Panasonic. There's no word yet on if they're going to actually manufacture this. The E1 Z Cam that I'm using right now, I can tell you that when it works quite well. The camera is glitchy and the autofocus system isn't top notch, but the HDMI output of this is very good. I would say phenomenal. The 4K internal recording on the E1 Z Cam sucks. It's awful. It's real bad. And even the 1080p internal recording isn't very good. External recording, again, excellent, but that's the big disappointment for me. Plus, the camera just crashes all the time and does some other weird stuff. And you still, to this day, I believe, cannot purchase batteries. I only have a couple extra because you can get batteries with the system, but they're still back ordered and out of stock most days on the batteries from the company, which is after a year and some change, it's ridiculous. You
sure that it's not a common battery type?
It could be. They told me this is custom. To be fair. I stopped searching about 5 months ago or 4 months ago, so it may be that they've finally updated that, but I stay a little bit on top of the forums for that camera and just throw in a complaint every once in a while when people are asking about buying one, but it hasn't popped up as a easy-to-find item, so it may be available now. It's still, if you guys ever see the E1 Z Cam out there, don't buy it. It's half-baked still. They haven't updated the firmware in about 3 or 4 months, and every time they do, they break something that was previously working. Lens support is an issue. Some of the Olympus lenses that I've put on here have gone wacky with this, and again, internal recording image quality is not there. I don't know what's wrong with it, why it does that, but it doesn't look very good. So stay away from that camera. As far as the Panasonic goes, though, I would have loved to have seen this about 2 years ago. You would have totally had me sold with an action cam. In fact, that's what sold me on the E1, is that it's an action cam size camera that takes regular lenses. And speaking of which, I almost forgot. I forgot to throw this in the show notes, but it's something interesting that's coming down the pike. And I think I sent you a link to this, Devin, but then I forgot to put it in the show notes. Check out this guy right here. We were all about the camera from Yi, the Yi 4K or YI 4K action cam. Well, it turns out the good guys at Backbone, I was kind of haranguing them when that camera was first released to make a cage for it. And their cages for the GoPro system allow you to basically put C-mount lenses and so on the camera and get a little bit more variety out of it. Well, it looks like they're introducing one for the Yi 4K action cam, and this guy will set you back $99 if you want to do it yourself, or you can buy it pre-installed on the camera for about $449. This cage just attaches basically to the front of the camera, and if you look around online, you can find some teardowns of the E1 camera itself. Not too hard to tear apart. Devin, what do you think about adding a cage like this to your E4K action cam?
I feel like it's more adding a lens system to the camera more than a cage, because I mean the camera's pretty hardy, and throw a plastic cage on it, it'll kind of survive anything like the GoPros will. But being able to do all this C-mounts and everything else, I think it's great, because while I've seen this for GoPro, I've never even considered it because the price has been so insane. It's like, hey, that $400 GoPro plus $300 for us to tear it apart and add this lens mount to it. And so this kind of puts it in that price point where you can get a really great looking 4K camera with all these options, Wi-Fi, everything else, a reliable support structure, but start throwing on some C-mount lenses, start throwing on some 16 millimeters, f1.2s and things like that, and get some shallow depth of field out of your action cam. Now you're looking at like an actual crash cam, one that you can put a lens mount on, get the shot you want. It's really exciting simply because the price point. This isn't new, because I think this has been going on since the GoPro 3. But at this price point, it's a totally different thing. And so that's why I'm excited for it. I don't know if I'd pull the trigger on it yet, but it definitely makes me consider it.
Yeah, Backbone has been making the Ribcage for the GoPro line of cameras for at least 3 or 4 generations. And,
yeah,
I'm with you. When you have a $450, $500 action cam, it's like, I don't know if I want to tear this apart and eliminate my ability to shoot really wide unless I buy a special adapter.
Right.
With the Yi 4K action cam, what is it, $249? I mean,
yeah.
You break that, tear it apart, not as expensive and sort of a cute little guy. I don't know why I said cute, but okay. Next thing on the list, and this is actually something I'm kind of interested in, and I wanted to get your take on it. Mitch and I talked about it on the last episode, but Devin, we both know that the A6500 has hit the streets. This camera is now available for pre-order on B&H and should be shipping fairly soon. You've taken a look at the specs. You know this is an APS-C sensor, 24 megapixel. You also have the option to slap a focal reducer on there, which would actually, with the Ultra from why is the name escaping? Metabones. Yeah, Metabones. I don't know what I'm saying. The adapter, the focal adapter, you can actually get down to greater than full frame. What do you think about this camera?
I think it's an exciting option because of its size, and the price. The price puts it up there where it'll. I mean, we can be sure it'll be cheaper than a GH5 or other small cameras like that. For me, I don't see anything. I'm hoping that the autofocus system is as amazing as they claim it is. I haven't been able to see tests yet, and I haven't held one in my hand yet. But for me, I'm kind of about these Sony cameras, especially when you throw on adapters and stuff like that. You could get some great stuff. You don't necessarily get autofocus. I know some people never run with autofocus, and that's great for you guys. Sometimes when you're a one guy like me and you're running around, autofocus just makes sense. Now, like if you're shooting short films, like when we were shooting with the something like the Blackmagic, well, the Blackmagic is a 2.5K, and the EF mount has no active electronics for lenses, so there is no autofocus system. Besides, those Blackmagic cameras don't autofocus worth anything. But when I was, for a short time, I was running around doing some behind the scenes with my GH3, and heck yeah, I was using autofocus. It was documentary filmmaking. I'm throwing it everywhere. I'm reaching around corners with the camera, and I'm allowing the camera to get the focus, and guess what? It nails it. If I have it on my shoulder and I'm able to physically operate the camera, then I'll take over for focus. But sometimes it being in that small package, it's worth so much that it's able to focus on its own, because I'm going to put it in places where I can't operate the camera very well. And that's the advantage of having a small camera. So I'd like to see what that's like. But, this looks like it'll be super stable. And you talk about using a focal reducer to get a full frame look off of this sensor. I think for a lot of people it'll be a win, especially after the people have been so excited with the rest of the Sony lineup. I imagine people are starting to really buy Sony lenses. And well, I mean, I still, the few times I've shot with an A7S and had overheating issues and stuff like that, I don't like to touch it, but other people, they really love their 6300s and everything else. It looks like Sony's really growing in this market. And really exploding thanks to that A7S initial, impression with the low light capability. So I see this being very exciting for people. There's not necessarily one or two things that I go, oh, this is awesome, I need to have this. But I think it's at least some people should consider if they're looking for a camera in this price point.
I'm interested to see the touch focus in action. Using the 5D Mark IV for the last month or so, I was really surprised that I fell in love with the touch focus system. It worked so well to be able to pull focus from section to section by simply tapping the screen. And on the touchscreen front, I was actually on a shoot about 2 weeks ago, and somebody grabbed my camera to shoot something. They're like, "How do I focus this?" And I reached over and tapped the screen, and they're like, "Oh God, that's amazing!" I'm like, "Yeah, you know, like it's so much easier than pulling focus. Now you don't have to worry about it anymore." And I mean, obviously, it doesn't eliminate focus pulling completely, but being able to just tap and focus is a really handy deal, especially when you can set your time for pulling focus from one point to another. In many cases, that's more than enough to get the shot that you want. Now, with this, you could get to full frame, and I suspect when we see the A7S Mark III and the A7 line refresh, we'll see some of the features that are available in this camera, including the touchscreen capabilities, possibly the scaling stuff. I've heard rumors that there's going to be a 15 megapixel sensor in the A7S Mark III, and they'll be able to scale down the same way that they're scaling with the new LSI onboard chipset. As far as heating goes, somebody sent me an email about this, and I wanted to bring it up because apparently I'm wrong. I've been wrong a couple of times on this, and I wanted to correct myself. Apparently, chip sensor heating hasn't been an issue for a few generations now. The heating issues are mostly in the processor side of things, from what I've come to understand. And I haven't been able to find a white paper on this that specifically says it's all in the CPU side of things, but it sounds like that's more the case than not. And a lot of the heating issues that you get with the A6300 from the users I've talked to are right on the back portion of the camera, and that spot is where the CPU's heatsink is located for the camera itself. So apparently sensor heating isn't as big of an issue as I remember it being not too many years ago. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I wanted to put that out there.
I think the sensor definitely adds heat. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I don't build these cameras. I don't know, but I feel like it's an understanding that, hey, if you want really good low light performance, you usually have to stack a heat sink or active cooling. I mean, there's a reason why the C300 has a fan. And I'm pretty sure it's not necessarily for the processor, because so many things like H.264 encoding and things like that are done on a pre-built chip level instead of like a computer processor sitting there crunching numbers. It's a processor that's built to do that one thing. Because we know, what was it, the hack for the old 5Ds where you would tear them apart and put a computer heatsink on the sensor to get better low light performance for doing astrophotography and things like that. So it's definitely, maybe it's not that like the sensor is overheating the camera, but the sensor definitely adds heat to the system. Hence why when you remove the heat, you get better low light performance. There's less noise in the image and the sensor can work better. So you could be right, though. It could be the way that Sony's using their processor, and maybe they're asking too much from their hardware for such a small package that it causes an overheating issue. The way I look at it, either way, it overheats, and that hurts the reliability, and that's why it's more sketchy for me to use it out on a shoot than something like my GH3 or GH4, where I could sit in 110-degree sun all day, and after 5 or 6 hours, it still chugs away without a problem, even when it's hot to touch because it's been baking in the sun. So that's something I look for in a camera is like how rugged it is, because I'm going to use it in wet situations. I'm going to use it in dry and dusty situations. So that's what I care about. But you could be right. It could be all processor, and it's just the processor's overheating and the camera's turning off because it's protecting. Because, man, if that processor fries, there's no way that's going to get repaired for cheap. So
Yeah, and I did have overheating issues on the 5D Mark III and the 5D Mark II as well. So it's not as though they're the only cameras, and even the higher end cameras are affected. My issue with the 5D Mark III was actually shooting in the summer in Nebraska, where it was 110 already, and then we were shooting for several hours at a time. The camera would overheat in about an hour and a half of shooting, which is still, all right, guys, time for a water break. Let the camera cool down. So not horrible. Next camera on the list here, and this one is another Sony offering. This is the RX100 Mark V, excuse me, and this guy has pretty much everything that the A6300 had on a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor, good zoom range, super pocketable, very tiny. What do you think about this guy? You want this as your next G cam, C cam? How many tiers down do we go?
How would you compare this to your LX100? Because the only thing I see that really makes me excited is the fact that it claims that it does full HD video up to 960 frames. That's kind of insane.
Yeah,
right?
the high frame rates for the Sony cameras, they get a little sketchy at those extreme high frame rates. The image quality is not that amazing. 120 frames per second is good. The 960, many people have been very disappointed with that in particular.
Well, understandably so. I think people demand way too much. Well, first off, that's why I like that Panasonic doesn't push the high speed thing, because, I mean, really, guys, if you want 960 frames to be broadcast, good, or is going to fit in great with your A cam for your whatever film you're shooting, it's a crazy amount of bit rate, man. You need tons of RAM, and then that RAM needs to offload to a hard drive. There's a reason why the high speed cameras are super expensive, and there's a reason why they take a long time to do their job. So 960 is a really cool, I'm hanging out with my friends and we're doing something funny. But in terms of actually using it for production work, I never expect it to be usable because the bitrate just can't hold up, and there's not enough RAM in these little cheap cameras. So either way, I mean, that's what I'm kind of hoping for a GH5, is that if it has that better I/O, that we could maybe get up to 120 or 160 with really great image quality. Because we all know 96 frames per second was kind of disappointing because the bitrate wasn't there. So I'd like to see something where they can push the bitrate up to 200 or 300 megabit per second to be able to handle a higher quality with these high speeds. So I mean, that's a cool feature, but for me, that's not a selling point. The lens is really cool. For sure, it's definitely something that is super usable, walk around kind of thing. 4K. It's got log, which is interesting in such a small camera. I'm not complaining. I'm happy that it has log. Then it works as a B cam if you want to intercut. That's great. I'd like to see more people just throw log into their cameras, even though people may not use it correctly, in my opinion. I like to see that it's in there just as an option for other people. But yeah, it's exciting. I mean, would you use this to replace your LX100?
Probably not. You used my LX100 alongside me at NAB. The image stabilization is very good. The camera is good. It does a beautiful job. The 4K footage out of it looks very nice. The menu and interface system are a little clunky, and you do have to spend some time setting the camera up specifically to shoot 4K footage. But dang, is it a good camera. And currently you can find the LX100 on the used market for $450, which is a freaking bargain. The Micro Four Thirds sensor in there, although the lens element doesn't utilize the entire sensor, it still uses a bigger region than this 1-inch sensor from Sony, and you get better shallow depth of field out of that. The macro features on that camera are excellent. The trade-off, though, is it's much bulkier than the RX line of cameras. The RX 100 series has been known for being about 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick and being able to slide into your pocket. You held the LX 100. That's not going in your pocket. It's not a pocketable camera. I mean, it's small. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's not something that you could just shove in your pocket unless you're wearing cargo pants. That said, it's a beautiful camera, and I hope to goodness that Panasonic updates the LX line, because the LX100 is a phenomenal little camera, and I would buy it in a heartbeat if they made a newer version of that with some upgrades, maybe low light performance and an audio jack of some kind. Although I have considered drilling a hole into my LX100 and installing an audio jack.
The camera is so affordable that you can almost consider drilling a hole in it. You know, it's a little different if it's your 1DC or something like that, super expensive camera. It's harder to justify, hey, let me crack it open. And that's what impressed me when people were cracking open their 5Ds to do remove the mosaic filter. They'd scratch that off or whatever and all that kind of stuff. That impressed me because I'm like, that's a lot of money that you're playing with there. I don't have that kind of money, but something like a camera for $450 puts it kind of in that GoPro action cam territory. So yeah, I think
that's actually exactly what I use mine for. It's a pocketable B cam, and I carry it around more than I carry around a GoPro or even my Yi 4K action cam, because guess what? I have all the controls of a real camera in something that's slightly bigger than a GoPro, but in a manner with image stabilization and all the other little features that make it freaking amazing. It's a great little camera to shoot with, and I know exactly how my footage is going to turn out. I know it's going to be good. I'm not guessing with the GoPro where I'm shooting blind, and I'm not compromising with my focal lengths because I have an option of a zoom that's, I think it's 24 to 75 equivalent zoom range, which is very useful, especially you don't always want freaking ultra wide on everything. Don't get me wrong, I love wide, but ultra wide, not always for me. I hope they create a update to the LX100. So that's my dream camera. Devin, this camera probably not for you for $1,000.
Probably not. No.
Okay. Next thing on the list here, and this is something sort of interesting, sort of not. We talked about some of the Transcend cards that were coming out that have 280 to 300 megabit per second read-write speeds. SanDisk has also introduced these. These are the UHS-2 variety. And before you go out and start buying one of these, remember, guys, not a lot of cameras are compatible with UHS-2. Most of them are UHS-1. And you can use these cards inside of those cameras, but you're basically wasting the extra channels of speed, and this would basically relegate you back to the 90 or so megasecond you get out of the Extreme Pro Edition card. Now, Devin, this kind of coincides with some of the new cameras. What is the key micro SD feature that we see in the rumors for the GH5 and the Olympus OMD 1 Mark II?
Well, it looks like it's all rumors at this point because no one's seen it yet, but it's feeling like they're going to have dual SSD slots. And that could definitely be interesting because it could mean that they could have they could be working on slots that allow for these higher bit rates. I mean, that's what we're all looking for, right? Is being able.
So it is confirmed that the Olympus OMD 1 Mark II will have a UHS-2 slot on the card, and their 4K bitrate is going to be about 230, I think 250 meg, something like that. So you're going to have these speed of cards in order to accomplish that.
Well, this card here, because I always get upset that they do this, I'm pretty sure it put the read speed on the front of the card where it says 300 megabytes a second. Its write speed is 260 megabytes a second. So, but you're right, just squeaking by there in terms of being able to use this card with a system that fast. I mean, man, it's getting so fast. Do you even need buffers anymore for taking raw photos? I feel like, resolution hasn't increased at the same rate that the memory speed has, where now I wonder, do you even need that much buffer to sit here and take 15, 18 FPS on your raw images?
You definitely need a buffer. The RAM speeds versus write speeds to these cards are they're way different. You're getting transfer rates in the gigs to the buffers on your card, whereas to your memory card, you're even at, I think the top of the line for UHS standard. I had it in the previous show notes. I don't have it with me, but I want to say it's like 400 or 500 meg write speeds, which is still far slower than what you get out of RAM access. So you will be able to write faster and clear that buffer out faster, but you're still going to see a lot of big buffers for raw shooting especially. And JPEG, I mean, now we're seeing some of these cameras like that RX100 we just mentioned, that has a frame rate for burst of 24 frames per second, I believe, which,
wow.
That's outrageous. Now you can only do that for 6 seconds because guess what? Your buffer's going to fill up.
Right.
But in the near term, we're going to start seeing RAM prices drop and drop and drop, especially in these compact systems. And now I think there was an announcement from Intel that they were going to start putting onboard memory like stacked in an HMB style setup on top of their chips for server applications. But imagine seeing that in an ARM processor where it's stacked on 4 or 5 gig worth of space that it can buffer to and then kick out. That's very exciting, especially in the camera market.
And it's exciting to see how affordable these cards are, because every time a new card class, card speed comes out, my wallet hurts, because you look at the Ursa Mini with its CFast 2.0 cards and the price on that, and it's like, oh my gosh. Now obviously those are moving way faster than these new SD cards are. But I love that these SD cards are still affordable. I mean, for SanDisk, which people consider a premier brand, to be $100 for a 64 gig isn't that bad. I mean, you look and still SSDs. I mean, like $100 will get you like a 128 gigabyte SSD, maybe a 256 if you buy a really crappy one. But still, like, these prices are like kind of close to what an SSD is. Even though you're not getting SSD speeds. So I'm just excited to see that, hey, when I probably will pull the trigger on something like a GH5, that the memory cards to go with it aren't going to kill me. And that's happy to see, because unlike some people who ran in on that Ursa Mini, didn't exactly look at how much a CFast 2.0 was going to cost them and was like, crap, this is not a cheap camera. So...
Well, yeah, both CFast and the XQD standards are very spendy right now.
Yeah.
And, with cameras coming out with UHS-2 support, that could stave off the requirement for these more expensive cards for a little while longer. And the tech that goes into those cards is such that they can still use the same memory and chipset. It's just accessing it with a 2 streams or 3 streams or 4 streams, depending on how they set it up, so you can get to the memory faster and access different sections. I'm happy that they're doing that. I'm with you. I have a pile of cards here that are just going to be paperweights in the next few years as cameras update.
Audio recorder. That's what I do with my old cards.
It's a little silly. Like at my Zoom H1, I have a micro SD card in there that I pulled out of a phone that I didn't need anymore. It's a 32 gig card. You could record for years on that thing, and it never really recorded enough audio to worry about that. I believe the recorder was originally issued with a 2 gig card that you'd probably unlikely to fill up anytime in the near term. It's getting ridiculous. Memory, I'm glad it's getting cheaper, but at the same time, every time we need a faster write speed for the camera, we have to upgrade yet again. That's pretty much it for the show notes, Devin. I'm looking through. Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
Other than there's a rumor that the GH5 will have a full-size HDMI port. That's just a rumor, but that's pretty cool.
I'm think that's going to... Where are they going to put it? The question is, and this is actually 2 rumors for the GH5. It's supposed to have a dual memory card slot, and it's supposed to have a full HDMI port. Now, I've got my GH4 here, and Devin and I were talking about this pre-show. But look at the spacing here. You have enough spacing if you put a full-size HDMI port on there. If you got rid of the AV port right here, you could fit it there. Which no one. Oh, I mean, somebody might use it.
I'm sure there's going to be like 5 angry commenters out there who are like, "No, I need the AV to go with this and that, and like it's the only way it works." But
I suppose if you increase the grip size a little bit on here, you could feasibly fit 2 memory cards in there.
That's so much for such a small camera, man. That's like the dual memory card thing is hard for me to believe because that's such a small camera.
It seems like that's the feature that they've been adding in a lot of new cameras. Is like, oh, guess what? This one has 2 memory card slots. Now you can, back up to another extra card, or you can write across the 2 cards.
I'm all about being able to write across cards. That especially becomes important in systems where it's really expensive media, so your media may be a little small, like the Ursa Mini or the FS5 or something like that. We're using those expensive cards, but in this case, I would just love it for a backup. Like I was talking with DJ earlier, I think one of my SanDisk cards may have gone bad. I haven't exactly figured it out yet, but I think one of my cards keeps writing bad files. There could be bad sectors on it or something like that. So backup options are always good, especially if you have a very expensive shoot coming up and you don't have an option for retakes. So I'm all about it. I'll be really impressed if I see dual slots in something like a GH5, because I know they aren't going to radically change the size of the GH5. And according to the photos or the model they had at Photokino, which is like, I guess, who knows if it's an actually working model or if it's just a piece of plastic that's supposed to represent it. It pretty much looks identical size and dimensions as the GH3 and GH4. So that being the case, I'll be really impressed to see a second SD slot in it. As for other stuff, it seems like it's going to have a custom sensor. I don't know exactly what that entails, if it's a custom-built sensor for it. I think we're pretty sure it's going to be built off the same one that's inside of the GX85. Though the custom part, I don't know how it would be more custom. You were talking about
the GX85, because in the GX85 is still the 16 megapixel sensor. The GX8 is the 20 megapixel sensor that we're seeing in like the Olympus cameras and so on.
Well, you were talking about, you think that they were doing the weird multi-aspect ratio sensor like they had in the GH2. You think that maybe they might put something like that in the GH5?
Yeah, there's one of the rumors, and I don't know if this is substantiated or not, but that there was the possibility that they were developing maybe an APS-C size sensor that they were going to stick in there and then crop into that sensor and not utilize the outer areas. That would save Panasonic money in production, because if the sensors had bad areas, they were able to rebend them and get them at a cheaper price, and it would give them the option to use some of the newer technology, like the what do they call that stuff where they change the tracing of the electrical wiring from the front to the back of the sensor in order to provide better light. There's a name for it, but back illuminated something. So some of that tech is in some of the APS-C sensors that Sony makes, and I know they say there's going to be a new sensor in here, and Panasonic's working on it, but Panasonic doesn't manufacture a lot of sensors. I would still think, even with this camera, with this new GH5, that it's probably something in collaboration with Sony, and that's the touting factor for a lot of the cameras that have micro four thirds mounts, especially in like the DJI and this E1 Z Cam. They literally give you the part number for the 16 megapixel sensor that's in there from Sony's stock lineup and tell you, yes, we're using blah 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 sensor straight from the GH4. So maybe they set up some sort of proprietary deal where the new sensor belongs only to Panasonic for X number of years. Same thing with we've heard the rumors of the LSI chip being in the Olympus camera as well as the GX85, I believe, but that they've curtailed the ability for it to perform HDMI 4K output and some of the other things as part of their licensing agreement for being allowed that technology. But then the chip itself has the capability of driving all 5-axis image stabilization controls from a single chip, and uses the same algorithm for image stabilization as some of the more advanced cameras.
Yeah.
So those things, maybe I'm dreaming here, but I would love to see an APS-C size sensor in the GH4 or GH5 and have it cropped down. That especially if you want to go 4:3, 16 by 9, and so on. Then maybe we could get away from this freaking 2.3 crop and go to a 2.0 crop.
I would say it could be likely just because seeing how much they pushed big updates like anamorphic modes inside of the GH4. I think they really want to see this turn into more of a film camera or a camera used in filmmaking, because we see it in documentary. People love it. It's super sharp. But more or less, people still say it has that video look. By the way, the comments are yelling at us that it's backside illuminated.
Thank you. DSI. My brain was not working this morning.
But the and also that includes one of the rumors saying that it's supposed to potentially the GH5 will have film filters like Fuji and other things. And I think it could be Panasonic trying to push their camera being used in more cinematic applications. Because I think that's something that I see them push, and unfortunately I don't see anyone use. I mean, for anyone that is curious about taking something that maybe looks a little video-y, like a Panasonic camera, to get a more filmic image, you should consider things like the Hollywood Blackmagic filter or the Digicon filters. They tend to be a combo filter that is both a smoked filter, so it kind of brings up your shadows a little bit, as well as then also spreading out your highlights and spreading out some of that energy. So you lose a little bit of sharpness, which is kind of a good thing for that filmic look. You can see a few reviews online of people using these filters, but it can kind of take something video-y like a Panasonic camera and give it kind of smoother roll-offs and kind of give more of a film look out of that camera. So that might be something interesting for some of you guys to check out too.
I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comment section. One of the things I got to stop doing, and I love my clicky keyboard, but every time I type and respond to you, it's like all these clicks are just clicking through.
You and that IBM, you've got that.
I've been rocking multiple IBMs for years. I love
you live and die by that keyboard, man. That's crazy.
Anytime I find them in a pawn shop or any kind of junk store, I buy them and refurbish them because they're just such amazing keyboards. They're ugly as hell too, but whatever. Anyway, one of the last things I wanted to mention, and this actually came up in the chat room. I've got the GX8, and I've been playing around with that for a while. I like the camera a lot. It's nice, but I've been thinking about switching over to the GX85. And the GX85 is missing the audio jack, but the 2.5 millimeter jack on here is sort of useless anyway. But it's small, it's cute. It has most of the new features that we're seeing coming out of Panasonic, like the G85, which is the big brother to the GX85. And the GX8, I don't know where it sits in the lineup these days because it does have the 20 megapixel sensor. And I like the images that I'm getting out of this guy. I want the video image stabilization in body, for one. And I kind of want it as like almost as a replacement for my LX100, because I can take a few of these tiny lenses like the 15 millimeter or the 45 millimeter or even the 25 millimeter and pile those into a bag and run around with them and have great little primes. That's what I've been using this for, but it's not as small as you would think compared to the GH4. You're not really saving much in the way of size. Now, Devin,
the GH4 is already tiny.
Yeah, the GH4 is already tiny, but this is tinier. You've seen the hipster-esque Olympus Pin F, right?
Yes, I have.
And you've seen the GX85. Do you think I should go for style over function or function over style?
I think in your case, you own so many cameras, you can afford to go style over function. You know, it's the pen is a beautiful looking camera, and I think you would love having it because I don't think that there's any real downsides to it. Even though it may not be the strongest performer in any one of those areas, I think you'd still be happy to own it.
It doesn't. The Pen F doesn't shoot 4K video though, and a lot of people I've talked to say that the controls are pretty hokey, and there's a lot of weird stuff to try and get your head around when you're in the menu system.
It's an Olympus.
Poor Olympus.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm probably going to go with the GX85. I've been waiting. I've got this one on Craigslist right now, and 2 people have shown up. Hopefully, I'll chuck it out the door at a profit and maybe pick up the GX85 as a replacement that's a little bit smaller for this.
Sure.
Am I going to get rid of my LX100? Probably not. Am I going to keep this? Yeah, I like it too much. And, I spent the money on that cheesy wooden handle grip. And, it's also the camera, I hand over to my wife if she needs to go take pictures of something. It does such a good job. I kind of want the GX85, though. But I'm also, like you said, I have enough cameras. I need to curtail my purchases. Do I need 2 or 3 Micro Four Thirds cameras laying around the house? No, I don't. So I need to get rid of this before I purchase another one, or just be happy with this and lust after the image stabilization that everybody else is enjoying in the updated models. Well, on that note, Devin, anything else before we get out of here?
Keep shooting.
Keep shooting. Good advice. Never mind. I've got these mini lights that I'm really interested in from Aperture, but we'll talk about that on another show. If you guys haven't seen them, Aperture released some really cute little business card sized lights that are pretty neat. If you're into small lights, and a lot of them have magnetic filters and so on now, so some good offering there in the tiny light category. You can find me on iTunes, SoundCloud, and anywhere podcasts are distributed. Devin, where can people find you?
You just hit me up on Twitter at DevoCut. I'd love to talk to you.
And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, guys. This has been a kind of weird ending for this episode as we taper off and just meander about. But thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on another episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. Honestly, I'm still on the fence. Do you think the image stabilization, Devin, is enough to go from the GX8 to the GX85? By the way, audio listeners are out.
Yeah, I would say so.
You think so?
If you're talking about, like, especially to a camera that you can just throw at somebody and have them get really good footage, then I think it totally calls for it.
Yeah. The image stabilization has gotten so good in camera with these that I find myself not using a tripod nearly as much as I used to. The A7S Mark II, I am like I was on a shoot and this guy was setting up a tripod for a bunch of shots, and I'm like, I got this, man. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'll just go handheld, no worries. And I grabbed the monopod and shot handheld, and the in-camera stabilization, every shot turned out just fine, no issues at all. There's a little bit of creaking movement, but it sort of gave it that CSI Miami look that you get when they're in the office, And I mean, that saved me a ton of setup time, and I was able to knock out 7 or 8 shots in half the time it would have taken him to set up for each of the shots. I think it's a must-have feature now for all cameras going forward. Image stabilization is freaking awesome. You don't agree?
I would. Yeah, no, I totally agree. No, I totally agree with you. It's it's one of those things where, especially too, as like a B cam. And as you say, because there's many times where when you're shooting something, the director, the production crew want it behind the scenes, but it's not like they're, of course, not going to hire anybody. And sometimes it can be hard to find somebody who even wants to do that. So being able to, like, maybe hand an extra actor, somebody who's really interested in the project, be like, hey, here's how you hit record, go shoot some stuff. And then being able to, like, actually use that footage when you get it back is a huge thing. So I think as, like, an extra camera, then I think it's totally justified. I would go for it, but that's me, because I'm all about ease of use, and especially you don't have a lot of tripods lying around anymore. So
well, I mean, I still have some pretty heavy tripods, but when I am flown to places and I show up and they have really chintzy tripods or no tripods for me, it's nice to have image stabilization. The other thing, and I wanted to mention this before we go, have you run into any of the issues where the in-camera stabilization tracks is sort of weird?
Oh, absolutely.
a couple times I've been, walking handheld with it, and I'll go to turn, and it's almost like it thinks I wanted to go the wrong direction, and then it hurries up and catches up and goes the other direction.
Yeah.
And so you'll see this weird thing where it'll like kind of drift the wrong way and then, cut back over really fast. And I don't know, is there a handling method for eliminating that or reducing it?
I feel like, in terms of a handling method, I feel like the only thing you can do is give smoother inputs, which sounds stupid that I'm talking about like adding stabilization to fix a problem with a stabilization system. But I feel like that comes down to how they write the algorithms for correcting it. Because there's obviously a physical problem of when you shift the camera that far and the sensor having to catch up with it. I think that it could be a two-part problem where one is the algorithm on how quickly it's reacting to you, where a good algorithm should react quickly if it's quickly moving. And there could be a second problem where the mechanism that actually moves the sensor is not able to necessarily fight the G forces that are being applied if you're doing something crazy like a whip pan or something like that. So it could be any one of those, without like looking up like tech sheets and seeing like how exactly they have the whole mechanism laid out. So it could be a physical problem. It could be something that's fixed in software. I think that definitely that's why they like keep wanting to update firmware on lenses and all kinds of stuff so that the camera can better work with those systems. Because it's still the same kind of problem you'll see on a few lenses like you saw on the
that's right.
2.8.
The image stabilization on the Panasonic was giving me really soft 4K footage. I forgot about that. But that one is more of the way the vibration works in the lens opposed to, because
necessarily
moving the sensor around
and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Usually I rely on the image stabilization in body for just handheld shots where I'm fairly stationary or moving very slow. I've run into that problem where it tracks incorrectly, moving fast or trying to walk with it at a speed that's more than just a crawl.
Well,
I
feel like this has been kind of, while the stabilization's gotten so much better, I feel like this is a problem we've had since even like a DVX100B, where if you're on a tripod and you put on image stabilization, you can see it kind of like wig out when you do like pans and things like that, depending on how fast you're panning. So I feel like this is a problem we've had for a while. It's just the stabilization systems have gotten so much better at it that we tend to just leave them on all the time because they tend to just work most of the time. So it's still not a perfect system. For the most part, though, I feel like, though, that's part of the reason why it's maybe not in bigger cameras. Because like Sully in the comments was saying, hey, why don't they have in-body stabilization in like an FS5 and FS7? And a lot of those cameras, I feel like, don't need it because they're already bigger cameras. The way you usually put them on your body or hold them to you is more stable anyways. I feel like what in-body stabilization is really good at is getting rid of that DSLR look, which is that look like a cell phone. You have this really light piece of technology in front of you, and as you like kind of just hold it while you're breathing, the plane moves in a weird it moves on a weird axis where if it's on your shoulder, it doesn't really tilt. It maybe moves up and down like this, but it doesn't rotate on itself. And I feel like that little bit of motion is what really makes it feel cheap on when you're holding a DSLR or a cell phone or something like that. And you can go, that looks like it was shot on a cell phone. I feel like in-body stabilization is really good at fixing that. In terms of using it for other systems, no. Like if I throw it on a Steadicam, I'm probably still going to turn all the stuff off because I'm going to let that do the work for it. Or if I put it on a shoulder rig, I'm probably less likely to like do a double stabilization system or something like that. But
yeah, I have to rely on you for shoulder rigs because I don't do shoulder rig stuff at all. Like I hate putting stuff on my shoulder or sticking things in my eye. That's definitely a news thing.
That's what's so great with the in-body stuff, and that's why you absolutely love it, is because it just allows you to get it off the shoulder more often and just kind of run around with it. So,
well, you've already criticized me in the past. I already shoot handheld way more than I should, and then the image stabilization is almost an enabler for me. It's like, oh, you were steady enough before that you could get the shot. Now with this, you can even be a little lackluster in your hand stabilization and still nail it every time. And
you know what though? It's while I tease DJ about it, I think it really comes to what's working best for the video and the production. In a lot of the cases, DJ is worried about moving quickly, and in terms of time spent on set and footage that we got, he has a very good ratio of that. Where
3-1, baby, 5-1 at the worst.
Where like this weekend, some people were trying to shoot 16 pages in 12 hours. That doesn't happen when you have, especially a camera like a Blackmagic cinema camera, where like there is no automatic focus, there is no stabilization. You're setting up sticks for every shot, and part of that too is so that you can have a focus puller. If DJ's sitting there holding a little camera, it's not a set where you have a focus puller and a jib operator and all this other stuff. So the right tool for the right job and different techniques for different situations. But in DJ's situation, he's being very economical by getting a ton of shots and a ton of coverage for a small amount of time, which is impressive, and it works. As opposed to other people may want a different look that requires more time and more effort. So.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm doing the same 12 to 14-hour days you're doing. It's the worst.
Yeah, but you're getting more done. You're working harder. That's the problem now. You're working...
All right, our after show rant's gone on long enough, guys. Thanks for hanging out in the chat room. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And I'm going to end the live broadcast now.